And welcome back to another FLP webinar. I'm Ariana, the host for our webinars, and we have James and John here with us again for a webinar over myths. This is more of a fun, casual topic for this month, and they're going to talk about some popular gun misconceptions during this webinar. If you have any specific myths you would like them to discuss, make sure to just submit them in the comment section. These are definitely the guys to ask. So thank you all again for joining this month's webinar. Guys, want to get us started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this.
I know
this is a fun topic, and I mean, there's probably so many myths that we're not going to cover that are out there. I mean, there's just so many. I was racking my brain trying to think of just kind of more common ones that you hear regularly. And especially, I'm sure you've had it happen plenty, James, with some of the employees at gun stores and gun ranges that you know, they think they know everything and they're experts. And I mean, sometimes it's just awful advice that they're giving those customers.
Wait, are you saying a snub-nosed J-frame 357 Magnum is not the best choice for a female shooter?
That is for every brand new female shooter, according to a lot of gun store employees. Actually, and police officers too. I've heard it quite a bit from customers I dealt with over the years. That it was a police officer friend or neighbor or whatever that recommended, oh yeah, you need this little tiny, small, snub nose, airweight J-frame Smith & Wesson, I mean, at least usually it was a 38 special they were recommending, not the 357 Magnum, but still, I would tell all of them, have you shot that gun before? No, but I trust him. He recommended. I'm like, do me a favor. We have one for rent. Go out there. I'm not even going to charge you. Just go out there, put 5 rounds through it. If you love it, great. And it'd probably be like 90% of them, maybe 85%, because some of them would actually like it, but it'd be about 85, 90% of them. They're like, this is awful. I hate this. Some of them couldn't even pull the trigger. It was double action only. And it's, opinions are fine and they're nice and definitely, listen. But at the end of the day, when it comes to your gun, for sure, you need to make sure it's a gun that you like. Don't just go off somebody else's, advice without testing it first and making sure you like it. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about Revolvers Never Jam.
That works pretty well with what we just talked about going into our first gun myth here.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you hear this a lot. Revolvers never jam, and I mean, part of it's probably people are thinking of like your typical jam you get with a semi-auto. Especially when you've still got the casing stuck still inside, but I can't, I mean, you might be able to help me, James. I can't think of a better word for it other than it is a jam because the revolver won't function.
Yep.
And I mean, there's multiple reasons for why it can happen. I mean, definitely not taking care of your firearm and neglecting it. And, it's just completely filthy and dirty and all that carbon buildup in there that stops the cylinder from turning properly and stops it from locking up properly. And I mean, I've seen new revolvers, right out of the box that have timing issues. I don't want to name that company, but I'm willing to bet you probably know which one I'm talking about. And it's not Smith & Wesson or Ruger.
That one you mean.
But I mean, the older ones from back in the day were pretty good, but some of these newer ones, timing issues right out of the box.
Yeah.
And it won't actually go in the cylinder to that chamber and strike that primer on that round. But one thing I've actually seen more than once, I mean, it's been several times over the years, is the ejector rod loosens up, kind of backs its way out while the cylinder's closed, and it gets stuck against the frame. And now you can't even open up the cylinder, let alone turn it. And I mean, I don't know if there's a better definition for the word, but that's a jam. I mean, maybe there's a better terminology that I've never heard of that I don't know about, but I mean, your revolver is jammed at that point and you're not going to be able to use it just like when you have a jam with a semi-auto. So I hate when people say like revolvers never jam. Are they known for jamming and having issues? No, not as commonly as a semi-auto does, but a lot of times with these modern semi-autos, a lot of these jams can be user error anyway and not having the proper grip on a semi-auto. Whereas with a revolver, it's not so much the grip is that there is something mechanical that went wrong with your revolver typically. So, I mean, to say they never jam is just, it gives you this false sense of security that if you need it, nothing will ever go wrong with it. And that's just not true. I've seen it plenty of times over the years.
Yeah, that's absolutely untrue. I own a gunsmithing shop, and I can tell you we've had plenty of revolvers into the shop to get worked on over the years. And the thing about a revolver versus most semi-auto pistols, when something goes wrong with your semi-auto pistol, usually you can just rack it, clear it, put a new round in there, change out the magazine, and the gun's ready to fire again.
Yeah, tap, rack, bang.
If something goes wrong with your revolver, usually it's a trip back to the gun shop to get it fixed. It's not something you can clear in the field. And I've seen a lot of problems with, just like you mentioned, ejector rods. That's a pretty common one. If you get the ejector rod and you smack that too hard, it is possible to bend one of those so that the cylinder will not go back into lock again if you bend the ejector rod too hard, or if you've got one that doesn't have a shrouded ejector rod. I've seen ones where people have dropped one that got bent and warped and it wouldn't go back in anymore. The lock work inside a Smith & Wesson or Ruger revolver is insane to look at. If you've ever, taken apart a Glock and gone, oh man, this is kind of complicated, I'm not sure how this is going to work, try to pull apart one of those revolvers and figure out what is going on the inside. It is insane. And there are so many things that can go wrong with it. One of the more common ones that I don't know that I've ever actually seen it happen, but it's kind of internet lore that's out there is Smith & Wesson has models that have a integral lock on them, so you can just put your little key and then lock it up the Hillary hole is what it's called, because the Clinton administration was kind of instrumental in getting them to do that. And allegedly there are stories all over the internet, I've never seen it myself, but under recoil the mechanism can twist or whatever and lock the gun up just like you would use the key on it and completely lock you out of your revolver. It doesn't happen often. I think you're probably going to have a much longer mean time between failure with a revolver than with a semi-automatic pistol, but it absolutely can happen. And if you don't clean it, you neglect it, it can definitely happen to you.
Yeah. And I saw the comment because I was sitting here thinking, like, I don't know if there's a better word. And AJ, he's an instructor that I greatly admire that's in Arizona. And he wrote malfunction, John, LOL, for another word instead of jam. I mean, he's right. It is a malfunction. Yeah. I just think that it's just so commonly thrown around with the word jam when it comes to a malfunction. And, to think your revolver will never jam or malfunction. Thank you, AJ. He's absolutely correct. It's giving you a false sense of security. I've seen the issues with them. I'm fortunate I've never experienced the issue with any of my revolvers. But I mean, that's like with lots of stuff. I mean, I've seen, when you've got all your different type of malfunctions that occur when it comes to the ammo and you've got your different misfires. Like, I've never personally had a squib load, but I've seen 5 squib loads over the years with other people. I've never had one, but that's almost always.
Can I tell you a story about that with squib loads? I've seen at least twice that somebody has come into the shop and it's always an old Smith & Wesson Model 10 revolver that they had a squib load in 38 special. The bullet got most of the way to the end of the barrel and then lodged in there, and then they kept on firing. And we're wondering, why are there no holes showing up in my target? And I swear we have found one revolver that had 8 rounds lodged in the barrel. And because 38 special is so low pressure, it didn't burst. The gun just finally, the cylinder stopped turning because the bullet was extending back into the cylinder and it locked it up. And it's both times I've seen this happen. It's always a Smith & Wesson Model 10. And usually they get a squib and finish off the rest of the cylinder before they know something is wrong.
Yeah, I got those old police special trade-in Model 10s. I got my grandfather's police issued Model 15. It's a -3. But one thing that I did see that AJ also put on there, and I mean, I didn't even think to mention this, probably because I don't do it. And I forget sometimes that, we do educate people, and that's what instructors do. And, for someone like us, like, we know not to do this, but he's right. He said the wrist flip cylinder close will eventually put the revolver out of timing. Absolutely correct. Okay, don't do what you see in the movies where they spin the cylinder and while it's spinning, slam it shut, and they just flip the wrist and slam that cylinder shut, because that will 100% throw off the timing on a revolver.
But it looks so cool.
It does look cool. Don't get me wrong, man, but this is real life and not the movies, and these are real guns and not prop guns. So,
Ready for the next one, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Fire a warning shot.
Yeah, so this is just bad advice across the board. Now, I'll approaching this from a legal perspective. The general rule of thumb is you can fire a shot at somebody if you are in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. And the fact that you're firing a warning shot completely undermines your self-defense case, because what it says is that I wasn't actually in such a level of danger that I needed to shoot this person to stop them from causing that injury. I had enough time to fire one into the ground. But what you're saying at that same time is, well, I wasn't really in that much danger because I'm firing a shot into the ground. So you're completely undermining the argument that I had to fire this shot to scare them, because if I was really that afraid, I would have been firing into the person. I can tell you, I've had cases where people have fired warning shots and eventually we got the case dismissed, or the DA's office declined to file charges. I've had cases where the exact opposite has happened, where the DA's office has said, no, this warning shot was completely unnecessary. Understand that if you fire a warning shot, you are liable for everything that bullet does. So, in the state of Colorado, you're going to be facing felony menacing, placing somebody in imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury by use of a deadly weapon. You could also be facing reckless endangerment. If that bullet goes into, endangers somebody else that you weren't intending it to, you're going to be facing felony charges for that. Illegal discharge of a firearm. If that bullet hits an occupied structure, even if it is the structure occupied by the person you're trying to scare, that is a felony as well. So you're facing at least 3 felonies, and your defense to that is self-defense. And you've just undercut your case by basically admitting I wasn't really that afraid. And you've got to convince a jury that, okay, I was afraid enough for this, but I wasn't afraid enough for that. And that gets really, really difficult to do with juries. It is a terrible, terrible idea.
Just a real slippery slope. And I mean, it's a question that I get asked. I don't want to say it's every single class with the carry permit classes, but it comes up at least every other carry permit class. And I mean, sometimes it's back-to-back carry permit classes, and people ask that. And I mean, I think some people have watched too many movies and TV shows, and I think some of them maybe remember a certain former vice president who's now our president that gave that terrible, terrible advice to everybody of just walk out on the porch and shoot off a couple rounds into the air. Granted, he was talking about a shotgun, but what if there's slugs in that shotgun? And so I always tell all my students, we do not fire warning shots. And I mean, aside from everything you said with the law, because I let them know you are going to be charged. Reckless endangerment happens in almost every state as a charge. But then depending on the state, like for you guys, you've got felony menacing. In some states, they get charged with attempted homicide. In other states, it's aggravated assault. So you're going to be facing these charges. And I mean, James is right. Now, how do you prove to a jury that you feared for your life? Because if you feared for your life, you would have tried to stop the threat that was going to take your life, rather than like, oh, let me just see if I have time to warn them real quick before they try and take my life. So it does become a slippery slope in court for sure. But I mean, you got to remember, my students are like, well, what if I just shoot it up in the air? And I'm just like, do you understand how many people die every year, especially around 4th of July and New Year's, from morons celebrating and shooting their guns up in the air? Those bullets come back down every year. And every year people do die from that. And then they're like, well, okay, what if I just shoot it down into the ground? And it's like, you shoot it down into the ground. What if you're standing over a gas line you didn't know was buried underneath that piece of grass and that dirt you're standing on? What if it hits a rock and ricochets and hits somebody? What if it comes back and hits you? And then they're like, well, what if I just shoot left or right of them? And I'm just like, that bullet, can travel up to a mile unobstructed. Do you really know what's down the road a mile away if there's not some, little kid out there playing out in their yard for that bullet to hit? And it's just they're a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Don't ever fire warning shots.
Yeah. Well, and since you mentioned the Grandpa Simpson saying firing shots up into the air thing, I had a case back when I was a DA that got referred over to me. It was an elderly gentleman. He happened to live near Colorado College in downtown Colorado Springs. And one night, some guy goes downtown to the bars, gets really, really drunk. He's stumbling home. He's trying to get to his fraternity house. He confuses this elderly gentleman's house with his frat house. He's pounding on the door, screaming, "Guys, let me in! Guys, let me in!" And starts, screaming obscenities. He's trying to knock down the door in his drunken stupor. And the old gentleman there, he didn't have a double barrel. He just had a pump action shotgun. But he went down to the front door and fired a shot into the door frame right above the door to scare the kid away. And it worked, but CSPD arrested him and charged him with felony menacing. And ultimately, I wound up dismissing the case because what he told the officers was, Joe Biden told me that if somebody's ever breaking into the house, go ahead and shoot 2 rounds into the air and scare him off. And I said, we can't charge this guy. He's got the vice president saying he did the right thing. You're not always going to get somebody like me prosecuting those cases, though. And any other DA in that office probably wouldn't have found it as funny as me and dismissed it.
Yeah. And I mean, my thing with that too is, I mean, you and I know, because we remember what he said. And I do, in all fairness, know that he was talking about, just a shotgun and going out and shooting off a couple rounds of bird shot up into the air. And I get it. But all my students over the years that have ever brought that up and what was said about, vice president, said that we should do that. They're not remembering shotgun or shot shell, bird shot or anything like that. They're just thinking any gun firing 2 shots up into the air, be it a pistol, a revolver, a rifle, and what if your shotgun has slugs? Seriously, shooting slugs up into the air is going to be the same as you just shooting a 9mm up into the air. It's going to come back down. If it hits somebody, it's going to be, serious bodily injury, possibly death. It's just, we don't fire warning shots.
No warning shots.
Yep.
Next one. You don't have to aim a shotgun.
Yeah, and this comes up from the other day I watched a James Bond movie from the 80s. It was the one where he goes after the Colombian drug dealers, and at one point the Bond girl in it takes a sawed-off shotgun and points it at a wall at 15 feet and blows a 9-foot wide hole cleanly through the wall there that they're all able to walk through without even bending over. And that's how it works in real life, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was, I can't remember who it was, and I wish I could. And if somebody remembers, AJ, you might remember who did this video, but it was an instructor that went out and showed that, yes, you do have to aim a shotgun to, hit your target and be accurate. I mean, I guarantee you, everyone that goes bird hunting, dove hunting, whatever, anyone that does skeet shooting, they're aiming their shotgun. They're not just like, oh, there's a dove and I just aim in the general direction and boom, I hit it. No, I mean, they miss their shots all the time. And that's with them, trying to aim. That's just in their defense, bad aiming at that point. You absolutely have to aim your shotgun. It is a gun. You have to aim it to be accurate. And I mean, you've got to remember those pellets. Yeah, they spread out, and that's where the whole rumor comes from. Is you've got these pellets, and I mean, obviously, it depends on the shot that you're using in the load. Are you using bird shot? Are you using number 7? Are you using double aught buck? Which have a little bit tighter spread than your like bird shot and everything. But I mean, that bird shot is spreading out like that. Because, I mean, you can catch that dove with 1 pellet and drop it, So, I mean, it's like, imagine having your BB gun back in the day. If you're like me growing up and shooting birds, out in the backyard or anything like that with your BB gun, 1 pellet's going to hit them. And I mean, that's the whole, but you're closer to them typically in your backyard and, they're up in your trees or whatever. But because I remember I used to do that in Georgia. And when we moved to Texas, my mom did not want me shooting the birds. We had bigger property out in Georgia. It's not like the 0 lot lines in Texas where your neighbor's house is right there. And, we had all these woods around the house in Georgia and everything. But she was like, don't do that here, at this new house in Texas. And I'm like, okay, Mom. And then it was during the summer, our first summer there in the new house. And we have a pool out in the back. And the birds, I don't know what they are. They look like crows to me, but I guess they're called grackles. But, just these, they look like crows, just these black birds that just sit in your yard and squawk. But mom was mad because they were pooping all over the pool deck. And she was like, she comes in my room and I'm just in there. I was playing a video game. I'm like 14 and I'm in there playing a video game. And she's like, you still got your BB gun? I was like, yeah. She's like, go kill as many birds as you can. And I was like, okay, great. But, that's the whole point of the shotgun. Yeah, it's spreading out. You're shooting them from 40 yards away sometimes. And just one of those pellets spreading out, great. But I mean, think about that. If you're aiming at an attacker, or in this case, not aiming at an attacker, and just one little pellet hits them, all you did was make them mad. That's not going to stop the threat to your life. And I mean, there's so many different, loads that you can use and shotgun shells that you can use. If you're shooting a slug, it's like shooting a bullet. There is no spread on a slug. And so you hear it a lot from gun store employees that don't know what they're talking about. Like, oh yeah, this is exactly what you need. This shotgun for home defense. It'll be great. You don't even really have to aim it, just shoot in their general direction and you'll hit them. And I'm like, that is not how that works.
Yeah. The number that I kind of live by on this is with a cylinder bore 12 gauge barrel, you're going to get a half to an inch of spread in the shotgun pattern per yard that you're firing. Yeah. Most people, if you think about what is the longest shot you could possibly take in your house, 10, 12 yards. So you may get 10 or 12 inches of spread on the wide end. If you're using something like the federal flight control wads, you're going to get, 5, maybe 6 inches of spread on there. Yes, it's nice. It does spread out. It does help. It's not as much as most people think. And, I am somebody that, I've said before, I have a legally sawed off shotgun. And even taking that out to the range, it does not spread as much as you think. That half to an inch of spread per yard still holds true. You absolutely have to aim with shotguns.
Yeah. And I mean, especially if you're using, which most people are going to have for their self-defense loads for their shotgun at home. I mean, most of them have double-aught buck. Mm-hmm. That tends to be the most common choice for a defensive load for your shotgun is that double-aught buck. And I mean, there's not a ton of spread to that. Yeah. I mean, you have got to aim your shotgun if you want to hit your target. And I mean, there's so many different purposes, like I know with what we do, we're definitely focused on defense and people defending themselves and everything like that from criminals. But I mean, they're just fun. They're just fun to go out and do skeet shooting with. If you've never done it, do it. My wife did it for the first time ever. Like, I want to say maybe it's going on about a year now. And she just had the best time, so much fun. She was insanely accurate too, like more so than she is with a pistol. And she loved it. So, I mean, definitely for some people, when that, gun store employee is recommending you getting a shotgun for your home protection, it's not a bad recommendation by any means. Just understand you do need to know how to use it. You do need to train with it just like you would any firearm, and you do need to aim it.
All right, let's do another shotgun one. Just rack the shotgun and they run away.
Yeah. I know you've got an awesome story on this, James. So I'll just say my 2 cents real quick, and then I definitely would love to hear that story. You hear this again. It's just a common myth of, just rack the shotgun and they'll run away. And look, you got to understand some of the stuff we're talking about tonight. It's not to say it never works, but it can't be definitive that you think if someone breaks into your house and you just rack it, that they're going to run away. It's not definitive. Somebody kicks in the door and comes in your house, and while you're racking it, maybe the door frame is still creaking and cracking from what they just kicked in. They never even heard you rack that shotgun. So they have no clue. So, I mean, don't just think that, I'll just rack it and they'll run away. I mean, I'm not saying it never happens. It has happened where somebody racked it and the criminal took off running, ran away, didn't want to get blasted by a 12-gauge shotgun that you have to aim. But there's no guarantee that they're going to hear it. It's not definitive that, yes, this will save my life by just racking a shotgun. And then what I've heard from other instructors over the years, and I agree and disagree, and I go back and forth on it. If you're racking it, that means it wasn't already chambered. It wasn't already ready to go. Or you kicked a round out. And some people, they'll have it all loaded up not at the max capacity, but the max capacity they can have at that point because they won't chamber it. And so then their thought process is, okay, great. If somebody comes in, I'll just rack it real quick and hopefully that'll scare them off and they'll run away. But now you have one less round in that shotgun tube that it can technically hold. And I mean, let's face it. I mean, even with the extended tubes, you're usually looking at, you've got like 9 rounds tops. You don't know how many attackers there are. You're nervous. Adrenaline's going to be, there's a good chance that you miss, with that shot, at least with your first one. Even with just pistols, DPS officers miss 86% of the time with their first shot. And, nationwide involved officer shootings have a hit ratio of 47% or less. So on a gun that's already kind of limited on capacity, why would you limit yourself even more by taking one round out that you could already have in there? So, it's again, nothing's definitive. So has it worked? Sure. Will it always work? No. So,
yeah. So what you were alluding to there, yes, I am one of the people that has actually racked a shotgun and chased somebody away. I was telling this story before we started here. I was in high school, and I live in the flight path of Fort Carson. I was with my parents at the time, living at home with my parents, and we get choppers that fly overhead all the time. And it wasn't too uncommon. And one night I kept on hearing a chopper outside, and I go look out in the backyard, and it turns out it's a police chopper, and it's got its spotlight, and it's kind of looking around my neighborhood. So whatever, it was late. I went downstairs. My bedroom was in the basement. I had a recessed window well down there, and it was summer, so I had the window open. And then all of a sudden, I hear the sound of somebody climbing over the back gate of our backyard and jump down. And I can hear somebody breathing really, really heavily on the other side of the fence back there. So I go into my closet, I grab my Remington 870, and I racked it. I loaded it around into the chamber, grabbed another one, loaded it back up into the tube to top the thing off. And the guy heard me loading up the shotgun down in my basement. And the next thing I hear is, kind of scrambling, sounded like a raccoon going over the back fence or something like that. And I can hear him running off. So I take my shotgun, I go upstairs, I wake up my parents, I tell my dad, there's a guy in our backyard and there's a police chopper out there looking for him. So my dad goes into immediate Vietnam flashback mode, grabs the shotgun from me, hands me a .357 revolver and tells me, okay, you cover me from the windows, tells my mom to call the police while I'm covering him from up there. So he went and cleared the backyard with a 12 gauge shotgun and his tidy whities. And yeah, so I am one of those people that has done it. Don't plan on it, though. That guy heard it because he was trying to be quiet and hide from the police in the backyard there, and I have my window open, and it was a very quiet evening. If, he had been on upstairs in the house, he wouldn't have heard me. You can wait until I'm in the same room and try to intimidate him or something like that. But that means you're walking around without the shotgun loaded. You're not ready to go. And if something happens very fast, are you going to have enough time to get it ready to go? So no, it's a bad idea. Don't count on it. Has it worked? Yes, it worked for me, but don't think that it's going to work for you.
I think it speaks volumes, actually, that your dad ended up taking the shotgun from you and giving you a revolver to defend him with and cover him with. Like, he obviously has, a lot of confidence in your shooting abilities to take away the shotgun and to give you the revolver. Because, as we said, you don't have to aim with shotguns, right?
Yep, exactly.
All right, guys. Next one's dry fire hurts the gun.
Oh, God.
So there are the one place where this is somewhat correct is in Rimfire pistols.
Yeah.
Typically of much older manufacture. If you've got a centerfire pistol, if you've even got a newer rimfire pistol, 99% of the time you're completely okay. And if it's a centerfire, you're going to be okay dry fire. You're not going to hurt it.
Yeah, this goes back from it's usually with, a bit of the older crowd. And guns manufactured, 50, 60 years ago, and especially with rimfire. I haven't seen it really be a problem with any new modern, centerfire handgun by any means. Some of the rimfires still being made today. Yeah, there's a probability, small one, that it might catch the feed ramp on the barrel and kind of, bend it or shear it off. But I mean, with center fires, I mean, that's the one thing I don't get. And I mean, there's gun stores that freak out if you dry fire their gun. Now, good gun store etiquette is to always ask, the employee, do you care if I dry fire it? That is definitely good gun store etiquette to ask if they care if you dry fire. But I know like a lot of the big box stores, they'll have that rule that you're not allowed to dry fire, and the employees will tell you because it'll hurt the gun. And I remember, I don't remember which box store it was, so I don't want to say which one it was, but it was one of the bigger box stores. And I asked if I could dry fire it, and he was like, "Oh no, absolutely not. That'll damage the gun." And I was like, "What? What?" And it was a center fire, it wasn't a rimfire. And I'm like, "How?" And he's like, "Well, it just does. It just damages the gun." I'm like, "Okay, but how?" I'm like, "Explain this to me. Like, how is it going to damage the gun? It's a center fire. The firing pin has nowhere to go but in the middle of an empty space of a barrel. What's it going to hit? Like, what's it going to damage?" But they knew, they were just told that. Like, I didn't want to give him too much of a hard time. He's just doing what management told him to say. It is what it is. But I mean, think about it. For you guys that, do training and that, watch other instructors and how many instructors do you see encouraging dry fire practice? Dry fire practice at home. Do dry fire. How often when you're actually with the instructor in person doing in-person training, do they actually have you dry fire the gun and to kind of show what you're doing and that you had that little bit of a flinch where you push down? And I mean, they'll do it with students where they'll trick them and they'll have a loaded magazine in the gun, nothing in the chamber, and the instructor will make them think they put the mag in, but they didn't seat it all the way. And so the mag's hanging out a little bit, but the student doesn't know that because they're not looking down at the bottom of their grip. And so the instructor comes up and they're like, "All right," and they rack the slide back. Now the student thinks that the gun is ready to go and that there's a live round in the chamber, and they'll be like, "All right, now shoot." And you'll see the student do this, and they'll point down. They're anticipating the recoil, they're pushing down, but there was no shot. Nothing happened. And so they'll do it repeatedly over and over and over again until the flinch stops. And then eventually, without the student knowing, they'll actually seat the mag completely and chamber up a live round. And when they shoot, there's no flinch. They didn't push down. I mean, instructors do it all the time. Dry fire is not going to hurt you. And AJ just posted it, which I was going to mention. There's two really, really cool laser systems that you can buy for your firearms for dry fire practice. One is the one that AJ mentioned. It's called Mantis. Mantis has their own system. And then there's another really cool one called Strikeman. Mantis and Strikeman do laser dry fire systems that you can do at home that are amazing and fantastic. And for a lot of people, it improves their accuracy anywhere from 40 to 60% when they actually then go and do what they've done with their dry fire practice and shoot again at the range. And their accuracy just skyrockets. So I dry fire mine all the time. Never had an issue. So.
Yep.
Definitely. All right. A laser makes them run away.
I don't know how common this one is. I have heard it over the years. And I love it. I mean, and there's different lasers. All right. There's red lasers. There's green lasers. Now the red, they're infrared. They're definitely, a lot harder to see as far as the beam itself versus like a green laser where you can see the beam, going across the room, you can see the beam of the green laser. Almost like, I don't want to say like a lightsaber, but like, like a lightsaber from Star Wars, like you could see it. Versus the more common one that people have is definitely the red laser. And, it kind of like the racking a shotgun. Has a laser ever made somebody run away? I would bet $100 yes. I'd bet $100 yes. Somebody saw that laser and ran. But the problem is they have to see the laser to know there's a laser on them. And we did this all the time. Like this is like 15 years ago, managing one of the stores that I used to run. And we had these flashlights that this company dropped off for us. And they weren't great flashlights, but they weren't bad. But it also had a laser on the top. And so there was a button for a laser. So we would do this all the time. All the employees, we would grab one of those flashlights and we would see how long we could shine that laser on an employee's chest before they even knew there was a laser on it. And it got up to sometimes where it was a minute or two before they even noticed that we were shining a laser at them. More often than not, they'd usually figure it out within like anywhere from like 20 to 30 seconds. But I mean, we could shine that laser on them all day long in their chest, and they had no clue that there was laser on them. So how's the bad guy going to run if they never saw the laser? And so, I hate that. And you can kind of go with the laser too, is kind of like the, you don't have to aim a shotgun. Like people think, oh, you don't have to aim it if it's got a laser. Like, yes, you do. You still, any gun you have to aim. But just making them run away, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, James, but
again, I'm sure it's happened before. It's all completely contingent on them actually seeing the laser, recognizing the threat, realizing what's going on, and then reacting appropriately to it. And if you're talking about somebody that is, high or drunk, are they going to be able to recognize what's going on and react appropriately to it? Maybe not. And most of the lasers I've got on my rifles are infrared, so that people don't know I'm aiming a laser at them. So that kind of defeats the purpose.
Exactly. And if they're high, they might just think it's a terrible light show at a rave. Like, I mean,
oh my goodness.
They have to see it. And that's the whole point of infrared, is so you don't see it. So.
Okay. Suppressors make the gun silent.
Yeah.
Every time you laugh right before.
It can get really, really quiet, but it's never going to be silent. And
we should have added something in there, like movie silent.
Yeah, movie silent, right? I mean, the way that I explain this is, you understand, we measure audio pressure in terms of decibels. And OSHA, the Operational Safety and Health Administration, has said that any sound, no matter how long you're exposed to it, over 140 decibels will cause immediate and irreversible hearing loss. So really what most silencer companies are going for is they want to make a silencer that's going to reduce it below 140 decibels. Understand, a jackhammer is like 136 decibels. A running chainsaw is like 130. It's a logarithmic scale. So every, I believe, a 6 decibel increase is actually a doubling of the sound pressure at your ear. The most efficient suppressors out there are only, with 22s, are going to get you down to like 114, 112 decibels. That's still very loud. I mean, that's about as loud as dropping a phone book, if the kids know what that is anymore, onto the floor. And compared to a gunshot, that's really, really quiet, but it's still fairly loud. It's never quiet enough that you can fire it, and just like in Call of Duty, and somebody in the same room isn't going to know you were shooting at them. Mm-hmm. You can get it quiet enough that it's not going to hurt your ears, that it's not going to alert everybody within a mile that you just fired a shot. But if you're talking about more powerful center fire rounds, even subsonic 9mm and 300 blackout, you're still up in the 120s, and that is it's about as loud as if I've got my car stereo turned up very loud, but it's only for a tenth of a second that the sound is actually made.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, and it drives me nuts when politicians open their mouths about this subject on clearly something they know nothing about. But I don't know if you remember after that terrible Vegas shooting, that it was Hillary that was like, imagine if he had a suppressor too. We would have never known. I'm like, a suppressed AR is as loud as a jackhammer.
Yeah.
Like, I still wear hearing protection with my suppressor, with my AR. And then when
you still get the sonic boom of the round breaking the speed of sound.
Correct. Yeah. It's still breaking the sound barrier. It's still supersonic. It's not subsonic. Now, you get like your 45s, your typical 45 ACP round, almost all of them are subsonic, 230 grain, it's subsonic. And shooting it suppressed is a lot of fun. And I can shoot it without hearing protection, and it's not damaging my hearing. It's still loud. And a mistake that I made when I was younger and stupid. And I did it just because I wanted to see, but we had a full auto MP5 rental. And so the first mag, I did the 147 grain subsonic, no hearing protection. And it really wasn't that bad. Like, I was fine shooting and dumping that entire mag with no hearing protection. But then I was like, let me just see something. So I loaded up another mag with 115 grain supersonic, no hearing protection, and pulled that trigger. And it was like somebody was taking 2 penny loafers and slamming them together right by my ear, just and I mean, it wasn't pleasant. I did not enjoy it at all. I still almost always use hearing protection with all of my suppressors, even with the 45. And I mean, one thing you got to remember, a lot of people are shooting at like an indoor gun range or something. I mean, if you're in an indoor gun range, you're going to have to wear your hearing protection anyway. So, but yeah, it does not anyway make a movie style quiet. Like you kind of said, the closest you can even get to kind of movie style is if you've got a really good 22 suppressor. Like the Silencer Coast Sparrow is definitely a good one. Does a great reduction on the decibels. And you've got, your powderless or subsonic 22 long rifle that you're shooting through it. Somebody in the house would know that you did something, but your neighbor next door having a cookout, they might not. They might know something happened, but they might not be thinking gunshot, So.
Yeah. Yeah, my 22 PPK with the suppressor on it gets pretty close to sounding like James Bond. But yeah. I'll tell you, if I had ever popped off a round in my backyard one night just to see what it sounded like, it is very frightening when you think that all your neighbors just heard that and, oh my God, I just woke up the entire neighborhood.
Well, in the first shot, you got the first shot pop anyway. That first shot's going to be louder anyway. So, I mean, it's not until you're getting to your second, third, fourth shot that it gets a little bit even quieter at that. But you get that first round pop every time because there's no gas or anything built up in the chamber and in the suppressor yet. So,
all right, let's go on to the next one. We have a little more than 10 left. So, training, even the basics, is only for new shooters.
You can't do too much training. Like there's no such thing as too much training. And that's what terrifies me is anyone that thinks that they don't need more training. That terrifies me. I'm an instructor. I've taught tens of thousands of students over the years. I still go train with other instructors every single year. I still actively seek other training I can do. And obviously there's different training, but the basics, that is what's keeping everybody safe. And so if you think that learning the basics again or just having a refresher on the basics is just, too much for you, you don't need it. I'm not sure you're somebody that I want to go shooting with. The basics are there for a reason. It's what's keeping all of us safe, and I mean, I hope everybody knows the 4 basic safety rules, but if not, treat every gun as if it is loaded. Keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to shoot. Never point your weapon at anything you do not plan on destroying, and always know your target, what's around it and beyond it. And I mean, that's usually the order it goes in, but I mean, yes, they're all important. But honestly, if you keep the finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot and you always have that gun pointed in a safe direction, I feel like those are really the 2 most important. Because even if it is loaded, if your finger's off the trigger and it's pointed in a safe direction, what's going to happen? And more importantly, keeping it pointed in a safe direction. Even if you're being stupid and you're putting your finger on the trigger and it's loaded because you didn't check it, if it's pointed in a safe direction and you have a negligent discharge, it's not going to hurt somebody. You're not going to hit an innocent person. So, I mean, training is for everybody, more training for everybody. And the basics is something that you should constantly drill into your head and to everyone else. I mean, everyone's so focused on like making sure that they train up their kids properly. Train other adults properly too, not just the kids. Everybody needs training. I don't care your age, your experience, everybody needs it.
Yeah, and obviously every new shooter needs to get to a baseline level of safety and competence. And the thing is, even if we're not talking about going out, and I probably would not gain a whole lot if I went and took an NRA basic pistol class. I've kind of learned all the lessons from that. I've learned how to incorporate it into my life. I could teach the class at this point. Are there classes I am going to learn from? Absolutely. And, it may be that going out and taking a Travis Haley advanced, room clearing carbine class or something may not be something you need to do. All right, but you need to get out there. You need to practice. You need to get better at your skills, better at what you're doing. Make sure that you're doing it in a safe way. And if you're falling behind, and you realize, hey, I may need some remedial work here. Yeah, go and do some remedial work. Take a step back. Take a 201 level pistol class or something. If you don't need 3 hours on the 4 rules of gun safety, but you need a refresher on here's how to line up the sights. Here's how to do a good trigger pull. Here's how to hold the gun. Go and do that, but just keep moving forward in what you're doing. And I think that if you've got an older, more experienced shooter you can go out with, fantastic. That's training in my book. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you pay $400 for a weekend to do, but if you can afford to do that, those are really fun experiences.
Yeah. All right. Leaving your magazine loaded wears out the spring.
Yeah, this one just isn't true. What springs lose their compression or lose their strength based off of compression and relaxation. The cycle of going from compressed to uncompressed. If you load your magazine and leave it loaded, you're not going to lose much, if any, spring tension. And if you do lose any, it will be 50, 60 years down the road. All right. It's not really something you need to worry about, but understand that you can wear a magazine spring out, and that'll be by loading it and then unloading it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm guilty of this one. Probably up until about, I don't know, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I hear it and I'm like, okay. And, I wasn't thinking about the physics of it all. Just like, okay, yeah, keeping it loaded and, sitting in a safe for years on end, we'll wear it out. And, without thinking about it or anything, I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. And then I was talking to a good friend who's an instructor also, and they were like, what? And I'm like, I've been getting asked this by some students, and I'm starting to question how. How does it wear it? I mean, think about it. The police, the military, all their mags are loaded, stored away. Especially for military, these are guys that they're getting in firefights and trusting their life to. Why would they keep their mags constantly loaded if it was going to wear the spring out? And then it's when you think about the physics of it, you're absolutely right. Having it compressed, it's just sitting there compressed. It's not doing anything. It's, loading and unloading, or, shooting it, going to the range, loading up a mag, shooting it, loading it back up, shooting it. That's where you're putting all the wear and tear on the spring when it's compressing and decompressing. That's what's causing them to wear out. And so, I've got mags now that I've probably had loaded up in my safe for the last probably 5 years, 6 years, and I am sure if I went to the range with them right now, they would be completely fine. I've got several different mags for several different guns now that I just keep completely loaded regularly. AR mags, AK mags, Glock mags, SIG mags. And I know at least with my Glocks and my SIGs, it's been a while since I got to go out and have fun with my ARs or my AKs, but I still get to go out and shoot my Glocks and my SIGs, and I've had no issues. I've literally never replaced a spring on a magazine, ever. And mine are loaded. So,
Yep. Shotgun shells won't penetrate walls.
I don't know how many cases people need to see. And again, obviously the load you're using and the shells you're using and everything has some impact on this, but even birdshot penetrates through drywall. And then most people, again, they've got slugs or they've got double-aught buck in there. I guarantee you that double-aught buck and those slugs will penetrate many, many layers of drywall. Many. And especially even with the slugs, man, they will penetrate through a 2x4. So I don't know where that myth comes from. I think it's something that it's the whole shotgun myth combined that gives people this warm, fuzzy feeling of oh, I don't have to aim it, and oh, I can just rack it and they'll run away. And then the third one of, oh, great, even if I do shoot and miss, that it won't go through the walls and, hit my loved ones in another room. Yes, it absolutely can. And it has. I don't know where some of these myths come from. I just don't get it.
Yeah. Well,
here's not your James
here's the thing to think about. Sorry, no, we're talking over each other. But if your round won't go through a piece of drywall, Is that something you want to be shooting somebody with if you really need to? I'm sure that you could find, shotgun shot, the 22 rat shot or something like that, that absolutely will not penetrate a piece of drywall. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, you're not going to shoot through, but you're not going to damage whatever you're trying to shoot at unless it's a grasshopper. It's just not going to do it. And picture this for most people, if they're using a shotgun in a home defense situation, they're going to be shooting double-aught buck, like you said. That is a 33 caliber lead ball, weighs a little over 100 grains. So you're basically shooting a 380 full metal jacket. You're shooting 8 of them at one time. That is absolutely going to go through a wall. It's absolutely going to penetrate through. And yeah, you can get smaller and smaller. You can get to the point where you can maybe you're going to be comfortable with the amount of drywall you're going to be able to shoot through with that. But how much damage is that round actually going to do? The interesting thing is if you want a round that's going to have limited penetration inside a standard American residential wall, I think the best you can go with is actually a 5.56. Because the reason that one doesn't penetrate quite as far into stacks of drywall, and it'll definitely go through one, no matter what load you're using, it's going through it. But it's just because it breaks up so quickly, because it's got so much energy, the bullet can't contain it. If you want a good video, dispelling this myth, I think Grantham did a video on this a couple of months ago, where they set up a bunch of fake drywall walls and saw how many walls they would go through. And spoiler alert, the 12 gauge shotgun shooting double-aught buck went through all of them.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Gun show myth, the gun show loophole.
I mean, this was, I think, more of a scare tactic from politicians and the media, and kind of pushing their agenda to terrify everybody. They're like, oh my gosh, all these people go to gun shows and they just buy guns all willy-nilly. Like, it's not what happens at a gun show. You've got to remember, when you go to a gun show, the majority, and I mean like 99% of the people selling guns at a gun show are licensed FFL dealers. Literally, these are people that they have their gun stores, and whether they close down for the day for the gun show, or whether they just got whatever, some of the staff still at the gun store, they're taking their guns from their gun store, going to the gun show, setting up a booth. Do you think magically that now they're at this gun show, they don't have to follow the ATF and federal regulations? They are still following all the same rules and regulations that they are required by law to follow as if you walked into their gun store and bought it. So the overwhelming majority of people at gun shows are still filling out the federal 4473 form, are still having background checks done, or at least having to present that they have a carry permit. And they're still doing everything they would do to purchase a gun at a gun show that they would do at a gun store, because these are all licensed, federally regulated FFL selling it there. Your few exceptions are those kind of like random private sellers that you'll see walking around a gun show. Usually they'll have like some old terrible rifle or shotgun slung over their shoulder that's all rusty, and they've got like a little tag up in the barrel, and it's like, ask me about my gun or how much I'm selling it for, something like that. So you do get some private sellers there, but all those booths are all federally still regulated FFLs that are doing background checks. And I mean, depending on the state you're in, because some states private sales are illegal. You can't do private sales. In Texas, you can, where I'm at. In Texas, you can still do a private sale. But I mean, in some states like California, like you can't even just, like a dad can't just gift his son his gun. They literally have to go to an FFL and have a background check done on the son. Like, they can't even just give their son a gun as a gift anymore. But I mean, there are more private transactions done for states that allow it regularly every day on sites like Arms List or Texas Gun Trader or anything like that than there is at a gun show for an entire weekend.
And when people talk about the quote unquote gun show loophole, what they really want to do is make it illegal for somebody to privately sell their firearm to somebody else. Unfortunately, Colorado went and did this back in 2013. You now cannot transfer a firearm. If I've got, a friend that I've known for 20 years that I know he is not a felon, he's not disqualified, he can go and purchase a firearm, and he wants to go buy, wants to do a horse trade with me and trade one gun of mine for one gun of his, we can't do it anymore. It's illegal in Colorado, and that's what they're really talking about when they say close the gun show loophole. It has nothing to do with gun shows. It has everything to do with making it illegal for you to privately sell a firearm.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing too, even with private sales, you still do have to follow the laws. They have undercover ATF agents. I mean, ATF has a booth at gun shows, but they've got undercover agents that go to these shows. And I mean, people forget, like, to buy a handgun, you have to be a resident of that state that you're buying the handgun in. Like, I cannot go to Colorado and buy a handgun in Colorado and leave with it. Now, I can pay that gun store in Colorado money, and then they will transfer it to a gun store in Texas, where then I would go have it transferred to me, pick it up, do the federal form. And so that's one thing that they'll do at gun shows with the few private sellers that are there, is an undercover ATF agent from another state will be there, and they'll go up and they'll buy the handgun from that guy. And then afterwards, because this happened, it was in Texas ATF agent at a Texas gun show, and they had an Oklahoma ATF agent in town for the gun show. And they went up and they went and bought this gun from this private seller. And so it was the Oklahoma agent that bought it from him. And so he gave him the money, guy gave him the gun, and then they opened up their badges and let him know that they were. Now, it was an older gentleman. It was in no way his intent to skirt the federal law or anything like that. And I mean, this is going to catch me some hate, I'm sure. A lot of the ATF agents are actually really, really cool guys that are gun guys like us. I mean, a lot of those men and women that are just your regular ATF agents, they think we should be able to buy suppressors without having to do a tax stamp, that we buy it the same way we do a gun. You just walk into the store, fill out the form, pass the background check, boom, here's your suppressor. Have a nice day. So, like, I get it. ATF's done a lot of stuff over the years I don't agree with and I don't approve of. But, I mean, you got to remember, they could have easily charged that guy with a felony, but they didn't. They gave him back his gun that he was selling privately. He gave them back the cash, and they just informed him, look, technically what you did is illegal. When you actually sell this privately, we're not going to arrest you. Just make sure you're selling it to someone that is a Texas resident, because I'm from Oklahoma, and you can't legally sell it to me. But, I mean, it was all about intent. They weren't going out of their way to screw over this nice older guy that was privately selling his gun.
He must not have had a dog.
That's awesome. I am willing to bet the majority of our viewers understood that joke. At least I hope. But I mean, it just shows. I mean, some of these guys, they catch a bad rap because of what the ones at the top do that are basically politicians. But a lot of just your regular agents, they hate a lot of the stuff that gets enforced and what they have to do. And fortunately for those guys, they had leeway. And they didn't, they knew it wasn't his intent trying to do anything shady. He just didn't know any better. He just didn't know the law. I mean, who would? Unless you're in our industry. I mean, honestly, who knows that? So
it's true.
I'm going to bring it back to the penetrating walls. Hollow points won't go through walls.
No, it's just not true. You look at the amount of mass you're putting through, even if even something like a 55 grain 223 ballistic tip doing 3,200 feet a second, it's going to go through a wall. It may break apart on the other side of it. It may not go through a second one, but you're going to get through a wall. There is not a round that is even the what do they call those? The Frangibles that are designed to break apart and shoot houses. Those aren't designed to not penetrate walls. They're designed to break apart and not ricochet if you hit the hard interior of a shoot house. There's nothing that isn't going to penetrate through that would have any kind of usefulness for self-defense.
Yeah, and I mean, and that was the point of the frangible, is that, you know, you won't have as much penetration, you know, as you would with an FMJ or just your typical hollow point. And I think that's where the misconception comes from, is people are thinking, okay, yeah, the hollow points, that's what I want for self-defense because they're not going to over penetrate, like it won't go through a person. Hollow points have gone through people. They have gone through people. It's a fact, not up for debate. And it's the same thing with walls. They have gone through the walls. I think people think, oh, because they're mushrooming, they're slowing down, that it'll stay trapped inside the body or it won't make it through that layer of that wall. Ideally, yes, it won't go through the body. You know, that is ideal, is that it stays trapped in the body, doesn't over penetrate, go past through the criminal's body and hit some innocent person in the background. But it is completely possible. And I love it. AJ put it up earlier. He was like, BBs and pellets have gone through drywall. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, people have this myth that, oh, the certain type of bullet I get won't penetrate a wall. Yes, it will. It will. You know, ideally, hopefully it won't over penetrate and go through too many layers of walls and hit a loved one in another room if you missed. But that's just not the case, that they won't go through a wall. I've seen them go through walls.
Yeah. Best you can get is it'll break up and it'll just be smaller pieces going through the other end of the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Guns fire when dropped.
So we were discussing this earlier, and I believe that the finest example of this comes from Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies. Drops a MAC-10 and kills an entire platoon of terrorists doing that. Obviously, 100% realistic. This myth is confirmed. We got nothing else to say on that.
Dude, I love that you use the True Lies reference too. I love that scene. Just hilarious. I'm just dying laughing when I see that scene. Just, what was it, a MAC-10, I think?
Yeah.
It's just bouncing down the stairs and killing all the bad guys. Like, I love it. Has a gun ever, I mean, again, you got to remember with some of the stuff that we're doing, it's not completely definitive. Has a gun ever been dropped and gone off because of a manufacturer defect? Yeah, it has happened. It was, kind of more common back in the day. I remember a case where it was with an old shotgun, and I think it was a Remington, but I don't quote me on that. It might have been a Winchester. It might have been a Mossberg, but I think it was Remington. But this guy had just been hunting, and so he was done hunting, and he's got his shot. And there's so much wrong with this story for how this even happened in the first place, because he's done hunting, but he's got his shotgun leaned up against his tailgate, and apparently it's still chambered, and the safety is not on. And he's picking something up. He's bent over. He's picking something up. Strong gust of wind comes along, knocks the shotgun over off his tailgate, and it hits the ground, and it shoots him in the butt. He sues Remington or whoever it was. Again, don't quote me on the company that it was, but he sued the shotgun manufacturer. He won. They had a massive recall. So, I mean, it has happened, but it's not very common. The most recent experience would probably be when SIG first came out with their P320. And I think everybody remembers that and heard about it. And so the problem with the drop test that they do on handguns is that they drop it on the side. Both sides is how they drop it. And they drop it on the muzzle. They drop it front. And the problem with the SIG P320 when it came out, this has since been fixed. This was years and years and years ago. Don't worry about your 320. I have a SIG P320 that I appendix carry wall chambered. If I thought it was going to go off and hit me in the femoral, I wouldn't be carrying it. But the problem was they had it all slowed down. They've got it on video happening. And they were trying to replicate this, trying to figure out how it was happening. And it was a specific angle you had to drop it at for this to happen. And so it was if it hit perfectly on the rear of, let's call it the beaver tail, but the rear of the frame and the slide and on the bottom of the grip, and it hit perfectly being dropped at that angle. And it still had these, myths and misconceptions from everybody that didn't understand what was happening. They thought it was just from the force of it dropping that, boom, firing pin went forward and struck the primer. And that's not what it was. Because of that angle that it hit at with so much force, literally, you could see it in the video, the trigger would pull. And so, I mean, technically, the gun still functioned the way it was supposed to, is that it required the trigger to be pulled for it to shoot. It was just very unfortunate that if it was dropped at that specific angle, there was enough force to cause it to actually pull the trigger. And that's what it was. And SIG corrected it right away, did a recall. Everything's been fixed since then. But it's just, has it ever happened? Yes. Is it common? Not by any means, not at all.
Yeah, and SIG, I believe there have been 10 lawsuits filed against SIG involving post-recall P320s with people saying they went off accidentally. SIG has won every one of those lawsuits. So that kind of tells you something about that. And the classic examples of guns that will fire when they're dropped are the old Colt single-action Army, and the Series 70 or pre-Series 80 1911s when you carry them hammer down. And both of these are with the hammer down. The interesting thing was with the old Colt revolvers from back in the cowboy days, cowboys would carry them with the hammer down on an empty cylinder because there's nothing preventing that hammer from not hitting the firing pin if you were to jam that hammer forward and slam it into the back of the gun. The last company to get really bit on that was Ruger with the Blackhawk back in the 70s. They had one that could do that. It was a single action revolver called the Blackhawk. They recalled it. They found a way to retrofit and put a transfer bar in there, which I won't go into all the details on it, but it makes it so that the gun can only fire when you pull the trigger. And if you have the hammer down, you hit the hammer, the gun can't fire. And that solved that. I don't know anybody that's making a single action revolver that doesn't use a transfer bar anymore for that exact reason. And 1911s are another one that can be susceptible to that. If you've got an older 1911, if you have the hammer down, it is possible to hit the hammer hard enough that it can go into the firing pin and can ignite the primer and cause the gun to fire. The easy way to keep that from happening, if you got a round in the chamber, you carry the gun cocked with the safety on. That's the safest carry 1911 is. That's how you're supposed to do it. Even modern 1911s have a firing pin block in them that prevents the firing pin from going forward unless the trigger is pulled. Even on those, if I'm carrying a 1911, I carry it cocked and locked because it's actually the safest way to carry a 1911. Every other modern pistol that's out there is going to have some sort of a mechanism inside it to make sure the gun cannot fire unless the trigger is pulled. Glock has 3 of them. Everybody else has, some variation between, 1 and 6 inside their gun to make sure it doesn't happen. It's really not an issue. And the only reason it could have happened with Jamie Lee Curtis was because that was an open bolt submachine gun. If you have got an open bolt submachine gun that you legally own, you should be aware of the danger and fun that abounds with that gun and take precautions for it.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you.
All right. Assault rifles are full auto, full semi-auto.
Yeah. I put that on there because I mean, again, we've got to remember our audience that, we have people that are new to shooting, but we also have a lot of experienced people that, that watch all this. But it's just, again, a scare tactic being used by politicians and the media. Even calling them assault rifles. That is not what AR stands for. AR stands for Armalite rifle, the manufacturer of that specific one. Now, it's funny because, for people in the industry, like, it depends on who you're dealing with. Like, I'm not going to be that guy that is going to, if you call it an AR and be like, well, that's only if it's an Armalite rifle. Like, I'm not going to be that guy. I know what you mean. Now, I will admit that it does drive me a little nuts when somebody says clip instead of magazine. But on the flip side, I'm also not that guy that's like, it's magazine, not clip. Like, I'm not going to be that guy because I know what you mean. I get it. And so for them calling them assault rifles is, 1, just wrong. And then 2, that they're all full auto. And a lot of people believe that. And there's this huge misconception with our society of people that just don't know. And they're not stupid. They're just ignorant. And everybody's ignorant about everything. If you ask me how to rebuild a 57 Chevy engine, I'm ignorant. I have no idea. You know why? Because I've never learned or studied how to rebuild a 57 Chevy engine. And so it's the same thing with these people that they think all these ARs are full autos. They're not stupid. Too many people say that. They're not stupid. They're ignorant. They've been also brainwashed by media and politicians and people they trust. but they're not full auto. They are semi-auto, same as your Glock handgun that you have, or your, Smith & Wesson, MMP9, or whatever handgun it is you have that's a semi-auto. You have to pull the trigger each and every time for that AR to shoot. And we've gotten to where we just call all of them ARs. Everyone has their own, name. Like Stag Arms makes an AR-15, but it's called a Stag-15 because they're the manufacturer of it. The only true AR-15 is the Armalite rifle. Colt has theirs, the LE6920. I think now they make the CR6920, Colt rifle 6920. But we know what we're talking about. We're talking about ARs. The one that drives me nuts, and I don't understand this, and hopefully James can clue me in on this, is the new terminology that came out in the last several years of calling them fully semi-auto. Like, what is?
I think it's only if you put the shoulder thing that goes up into its fully extended position. Yeah, there's a lot of dumb things that politicians have said, especially involving guns. I think there was a guy in California years ago who said this, this is a gun that can shoot a 30 caliber magazines in 4 seconds or some stupid stuff like that. The term assault rifle, it comes from a German word, Sturmgewehr, that the Germans were using at the end of World War II for the STG-44, which roughly translates to assault rifle. The military has a definition of that. An assault rifle is a select fire rifle that fires in an intermediate cartridge. Select fire meaning is that it can be fully auto, semi-auto, 3-round burst, anything like that. Those just don't exist on the American marketplace because your standard AR-15 is not select fire, is semi-automatic only. So what we saw in the 90s was, because people pointed this out when, one of my favorite politicians of all time, Dianne Feinstein, started coming up with assault weapons bans and saying we got to ban all this kind of stuff. They don't use this term assault rifle, because people point out, no, that's actually a definable term, and here's what it means, and you're wrong. So they came up with assault weapon, and everything now is an assault weapon. And the definition of an assault weapon is it looks scary, and some politician doesn't like it. And they're about 186,000, I think it is, transferable machine guns in the United States. You've never heard of a crime involving one, because they're extremely expensive, and the kind of people that have that kind of money to spend on guns are not going out and committing crimes with them. Like, period. End of story. So it doesn't exist. It's not a problem.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that, and I don't remember which politician it was or media outlet, but they're talking about, and hey, use this fully semi-auto rifle, and I'm like, well, it's full semi-auto. Like, it's a semi-auto. Like, why are you adding fully to this word? And I realized, it's just scare tactic, and most people that heard it still think full auto.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to bring it to clip versus magazine, since you just brought that up earlier.
Yeah, look, we know what you mean when you say clip. When you call it a clip, we know what you mean. It technically is called a magazine. The only way that you're going to deal with a clip is if you've got an M1 Garand, and you slam it down into the action, and you send the bolt forward, and ding, 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 you shoot. Well, I'm doing the ding too early, but pow, 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 ding, and you hear that cling. Like if you've watched Saving Private Ryan, and you see them shooting their M1 Garand, pow, 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 ding. And that's the actual clip coming out. So they'll grab another clip with ammo, shove that back down in, and keep going. Other than that, it's a magazine, people. It's not technically a clip. But again, if you ever came into the stores that I was at and you said, how many rounds in the clip does it hold? Like, I knew what you meant. I wasn't going to, gun shame you, or, I don't know what the right terminology is here, but I wasn't going to shame you for saying clip. I knew what you meant.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you. I spend my weekends going on Instagram and getting up in rappers' faces for getting this wrong, and I think that I'm doing a public service.
Great work. work.
It's a lot harder to rhyme with magazine than clip.
All right, another one, aim for arms and legs.
Yeah, and this is another one of those ones. Even this is taking the warning shot even one step further. What I tell people is there's no safe place to shoot somebody just a little bit. Okay, if you're going to shoot somebody, there is a chance that you are going to kill them. There are multiple blood vessels. Usually, when somebody says, "Oh, I'm just going to shoot somebody just to wound them, just to or just hurt them a little bit," they mention shooting somebody in the leg, and the largest blood vessel in the body is the femoral artery. If you sever that, the person is going to have literally seconds before they bleed out. If you get a full sever of that, there isn't a safe place that you can just shoot somebody and they're going to 100% be fine until the police get there. Even if you crack open a round, pour gunpowder over it and light it on fire to cauterize it like Rambo, you are not going to be guaranteed that person is going to survive. And the problem is, if you shoot somebody in the leg and then the police ask you, well, why'd you shoot that guy in the leg? And you say, well, I didn't think he was really that big of a threat, so I just wanted to shoot him a little bit just to dissuade him from doing what he was doing. You are admitting that I was not afraid of death or serious bodily injury. I was maybe afraid of him. Maybe I was pissed off at him. Maybe I just wanted him to stop whatever he was doing, but I didn't meet the legal threshold to use deadly force. And anytime you shoot somebody, you are using deadly force on that person, whether you intended to kill them or just wound them. And by saying that, I just intended to shoot them a little bit, you are basically just admitting I intended to, commit an assault without the proper grounds and justifications.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing real. I mean, I agree with everything James said, and I mean, it is a common question that students ask. Should I just aim for their arms or their legs? And I mean, it goes back to, like you said, with the firing warning shots. And yeah, no, you're not going to be able to convince them that you feared for your life if you thought that you had time to aim for arms or legs. Honestly, and I tell my students this when they bring it up, and the main place I used to teach, we did their shooting qualification first thing in the morning, where they're shooting at a piece of paper, not moving, stress-free environment, adrenaline's not flowing. They're supposed to be aiming center mass at this target. And most importantly, that target's not shooting back at them. And so when they bring that up and they're like, yeah, I think I'll just aim for their arm or their leg. And I'll tell some of them sometimes, I'm like, I saw you shoot this morning, right? Like, I saw your target out there. You could barely hit that. You think you're going to hit their arms or legs in a high stress situation? You're going to miss. And there's a good chance that you end up hitting an innocent person instead. And it's, and students will ask, do I shoot to wound? Do I shoot to kill? I'm like, neither. You shoot to stop the threat. Once the threat is done, you're done, but you're shooting to stop the threat, and you aim for the biggest possible surface area. And I mean, the legs thing, I mean, like you said, it's like people forget you've got the femoral running down both legs. Do you know how many people have been shot in the leg and died because it hit their femoral? Why do you think police are so freaked out when they get shot in the leg and they're so quick to get a tourniquet on? Because they are worried it could have hit their femoral and they're about to bleed out. Well,
yeah. AJ is actually asking a question for you, James. He says, will that open up the shooter to civil liberties if you meant to?
Oh, yeah. If you civil liability, if you decide you're just going to try to wound somebody, absolutely that is opening you up for civil liability, because again, you're essentially saying I didn't have the justification to shoot under self-defense. And now the argument is, okay, well, he wasn't justified to shoot me because he wasn't trying to stop me from doing anything. So he was just upset. He was just pissed off I was stealing his car, or that he caught me in bed with his wife or something like that. So now he just wants to, not that my wife would do that, but he just wants to, and let's be honest, if I did, I would be shooting a maim at that guy. But if you're in that position, yeah, you're horribly screwed on a civil sense.
Yeah. All right. Caliber matters.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it so many times over the years, and again, it tends to be from an older crowd, but coming in and they're looking for a new handgun. And I mean, definitely the most popular caliber is 9. It tends to just be the most common that people are wanting to buy. So naturally, that's what I lead with. and I'll want to show them a 9, like a Glock 17 or a Glock 19 or a SIG P320 or Smith & Wesson M&P, HK VP9, whatever. And they're like, oh, wait, is that a 9mm? And I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, well, no, 9 can't do the job. It's got to be at least a 40, if not a 45. And I'm just like, yeah, sure. I mean, that's why so many police, SWAT team members, heck, even Special Forces, Navy SEALs carry 9mm because 9 can't do the job. Like, I get it, but I don't. 50, 60 years ago and what they were producing for 9mm ammo is completely different to what they produce today. 9mm has come a long, long, long way over the years. And there was the Texas State Troopers. They switched over from, they used to carry SIG P226 double action onlys chambered in 357 SIG. And just like the Secret Service, except they do a 229. And the whole reason for that 357 SIG round is that it can penetrate through windshields, through heavier clothing. It can penetrate through, the side of your door on your vehicle. But the big thing with the windshield was that 357 SIG could punch straight through the windshield with no deflection. And that's why they were trained that if they're having to shoot at a suspect through that windshield, that they can still aim center mass and aim right at their chest. And that 357 SIG round punches through the windshield and hits them right in the chest where they were aiming. Whereas, police carrying just your standard 9s or 40s, they're being taught to aim at the steering column because when that bullet punches through that windshield, it's going to deflect up into their body. But the Texas State Troopers switched to SIG P320s in the last, I want to say it was in the last 6 years, maybe last 8 years. And they've got them loaded with Hornady Critical Duty 135 plus P 9mm rounds. And what they found in their testing was that new 135 plus P round was penetrating through the windshield the same as that 357 SIG. And so, I mean, the caliber has come a long way, but no matter what, pick what you like, man. I love 45s. I love 10mm. I love 357 SIGs. I love those calibers. I love their ballistics. I love what they can do. I hate how much they cost. I hate the price of them. Now that would not keep me from having the right caliber to defend my life if I really, really thought caliber mattered. I don't believe it does. I believe shot placement is going to be the most important part of this, because if you're carrying a 40 and you can't hit the broadside of a barn with it, you'd be better off carrying a 22. I think shot placement is most important, and you need to be able to handle that caliber. I'm fortunate that I can handle all of those calibers. Most of the time I'm carrying a 9. It's just what I go with because I know that it can do the job.
Yeah, I think at this point, bullet choice is more important than caliber choice. But allow me to hitch my grandpa pants up to my nipples here really quick. I think there's still a place to talk about calibers. Masada Ayub years ago when people were talking about, you should only carry 9mm. Anything else is absolutely worthless. I believe that, his point was, if you're firing a 357 SIG, you've got an extra 150 foot-pounds of energy. That 150 foot-pounds of energy does something. It may not make the difference between a one-shot stop and a 3-shot stop, or it may not be the absolute changing of the world as far as what happens there, but it does something. And I think if you can shoot it accurately, you can shoot it well, you can carry the gun well. I like more powerful calibers. I just like knowing that I've got something that I think can penetrate a little bit better. In Colorado in the wintertime, if there is a crazed, methed out homeless guy with a sharpened screwdriver trying to mug me on the street, and he is wearing a heavy winter coat with 2 hoodies, a pair of long johns, and a t-shirt on underneath it, yeah, I would rather have a 40 or a 45 than a 9mm. If it's the summertime and the methed out hobos are all wearing t-shirts, 9mm is absolutely perfect. I think there's room to discuss it. I don't like how so many people I hear nowadays are like, no, anything other than 9mm is just crap and we don't need to discuss it. And yeah, there's room to look at it. I think 9's fine though, and you're going to be served very well having it.
Yeah. No, and I agree 100%. I think I put that on there more. I meant from the standpoint of there's people that they'll buy a 40 or a 45 and they can't control it, and they can't hit what they're aiming at. and it's not doing you any good. If you can control a 9 and not a 40, you're better with the 9. If you can control a 22 but not a 380, you're going to be better off carrying the 22. And I've had, it tends to be older people that, and I'm talking, we're getting up in like the 80s, 90s range, arthritic. And honestly, the only caliber they can handle is a 22. It's the only thing they can even hit the target with. But they shoot it well, and it's going to serve them better than getting a 9. Because everyone has a 9. Like, it's going to serve them better to have that 22 as far as defending themselves. But I agree with you 100% with the homeless guy with all those layers of clothes on. Fortunately for me, I tend to actually have the 135 plus P 9mm in mine. So I know it'll penetrate pretty well. But if I just had like some regular 115 grain, no, I'd rather have that 357 SIG or that 40.
All right. We have a couple left. Guns need to be cleaned after every use.
You can't over clean your gun. I've never heard of a gun being over cleaned, over lubricated. There's videos out there where the guy will even dump oil all over the gun and then go shoot it. I don't completely agree that like you can't over lubricate. Like I get what he was doing and the point he was trying to prove, but a little bit of oil goes a long way. You really don't need to use that much oil to lubricate it. I definitely prefer to clean my guns after every time that I go shooting, but there are plenty of times where I didn't, where I waited until the second or third time that I went shooting to clean them. For me, it does depend on the gun. If it's my grandfather's police-issued Smith & Wesson Model 15-3 revolver that I've got that he left to me when he passed away, I clean that sucker every time. I just don't want anything happening to it and, any kind of rust or anything getting on that firearm. I want to be able to pass this down to my kids and everything like that. But, my Glock that I go shoot that's, primarily polymer, except for, the slide and the barrel and then some of the internals. I'll clean that sometimes every time after I shoot it. And there's sometimes where I know I'm going to be going shooting again in the next day or two. And so I'll wait until after I've gone through 2 or 3 shooting sessions to clean it. You definitely need to maintain your firearms. You definitely need to keep them cleaned and lubricated regularly. But as far as the people that get upset if you don't clean it every single time after you go shooting and you just put like 50 or 100 rounds through it, I don't necessarily agree that it has to be done. Can it be done? Sure. Do you have to? And, your gun won't function if you don't? No.
So, it really depends on the gun and what you're using it for. Like a carry gun, yeah. If I go and shoot that, I'll clean that up a little bit, throw some more lube in there, and call it good. Just because I want that thing to be ready to go because I'm carrying it. If it is a semi-auto rifle, chances are when I get home, especially with ARs, I'm a big believer in run it wet. That way, after I get done shooting 100 rounds suppressed, and I get back and my bolt carrier that was shiny nickel coated is now completely black, I can just wipe that down, get it off quick, put on some new lube, slap it back in there, and it's good to go. Something like a bolt action, no, I'm not going to clean that every time I shoot it, because usually when we're talking about cleaning something like that, you're talking about cleaning the bore, and you absolutely can overdo bore cleaning, especially if you're using a bronze brush and harsh chemicals on it. You can reduce the lifespan of your barrel by over cleaning that, and doing it every time is one of those things. If it gets dirty, clean it. If it's not something you're betting your life on, if you don't feel like cleaning it, as long as you're not shooting corrosive. One time I shot a bunch of corrosive 7N6 through an AK-74 and got really busy and didn't clean that for a couple of weeks, and that was a painful experience. That was a lesson I learned.
All right. Drag the body in the house.
I get this one at classes that I teach almost every time. Usually the question goes like this. So under the make my day law, if I shoot somebody on the porch, should I drag the body inside? And about the first 20 times I got asked this question, I thought they were joking. And then there was a point where I realized not everybody is joking when they ask this question. And, I'll tell you, if you watch CSI, like 90% of the stuff they show on that show is complete BS. But They are actually pretty good at doing stuff with blood, and they can definitely figure out where the person was when you shot them, and they will definitely be able to see the drag marks bringing him back inside. If you have got a person that you had to shoot, don't move the body. That just looks really bad in court. Even if you weren't doing anything wrong, it looks really bad, and they're going to figure that out. Just make sure that you're justified when you take the shot, and let the body drop where it drops.
Yep. Yeah, I get asked it all the time, and I do the same thing with my students. You know, if you drag the body in the house, you've tampered with a crime scene, which is a felony for you. If they do want to charge you with that. But two, yeah, it does make you look like you did something wrong. If you didn't do anything wrong, why do you have to drag the body into your house anyway? And then I do the CSI thing. I'm like, yeah, I know it's a TV show, but those people exist for real. I mean, honestly, maybe they need to start watching Dexter and see what he does with his blood splatter, analysis.
Yeah.
They can tell.
All right, shoot at tires.
Okay, so this again is a very bad idea, because if somebody is driving away from you or something like that, shooting at the tires is placing people in jeopardy, and it's a very bad idea. I didn't personally have this case, but one of my colleagues in town did. We had a guy that was staying at a motel in Manitou Springs, just outside Colorado Springs. He was doing a training down at a shooting range outside of Fort Carson. So he had 2 AR-15s that he locked up in his car overnight. For whatever reason, he didn't bring him in the hotel. And in the middle of the night, he hears his car start up. So he grabs his pistol and runs outside. And as he sees his Jeep driving away, he decides, well, I'm going to shoot out the tires, because I've got a couple of AR-15s in there, and I don't want these falling into, gangsters' hands. So he fires about a dozen shots at his car as he's driving away. He shot 2 houses, a school, and a couple of restaurants that were all within visual range of the motel that he was staying at. The case did not work out well for him. It's just a very bad idea. And if you watch live PD every Friday and Saturday night like I do, you will know that just because somebody has got a hole in their tire does not mean that they're going to stop immediately. There's a good chance they're going to drive a couple of miles until they wreck out, and then you get to sick the dog on them.
Yeah, I think people have watched too many movies and TV shows, and I just don't get why they think they need to be shooting out tires. Like, I mean, I get it. You're upset. You don't want the criminal to get away. But, I mean, you're going to end up ruining and destroying your life instead. And what you're not understanding is you don't want that criminal to get away, yet you've just made yourself a criminal by doing that action. And, I mean, honestly, come on. I'm going to go back to, I've seen you shoot. I've seen your target. You really think you're going to hit the tires? Like, I know what you're capable of, and you're not John Wick. Although apparently, like every class, I get at least 2 or 3 people that are or think so. So,
All right, one more. Chicago's gun violence occurs because of loose gun laws in the surrounding states.
I hate hearing this. I hate this one for so many reasons. Again, let's go back to the fact that to legally buy a gun, I mean, let's face it, most of the crime is being done with handguns, not rifles, despite what the media and politicians try to make you think. It's handguns. Overwhelming majority of gun crime is with handguns. But to legally buy a gun in one of those other states, you have to be a resident of that state, first and foremost. So it's not like all these, people that live in Illinois, and I mean, the criminals are driving over to these other states and then legally buying guns in those states. Okay, let's just get that out of the way first. That's not happening. It can't happen. It's illegal. They're acquiring their guns illegally. And now you want to try and say, well, it's because of the loose gun laws in the states that border Illinois that we have all this crime. If those guns are the reason and those states' laws are the reasons that Chicago has all that crime, how come those states with the looser laws don't have all that crime? Why don't they have the same, if not more crime than Chicago? So, I mean, I hate when politicians and the media try to blame it on the other states. Your reason for your gun violence and your crime is because, one, you are completely disarming your actual good citizens there and making it next to impossible for them to even own guns, let alone get a carry permit. And then the next biggest reason is because of how soft you are on crime. That is why it continues to happen. I can't count how many interviews I've seen with criminals that come out of prison and they literally, to a reporter, tell them the crime was worth the time. I'd do it again. They didn't learn anything. Put them back in. If they say that to a reporter as soon as they're being released, throw them back in jail. So
yeah. I'm pretty sure I could take a banker's box full of handguns and just drop it down here on the street, and the guns would not shoot anybody.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody pick the gun up and pointing at somebody and pull the trigger to shoot someone. The reason the big cities have problems with crime is because there are more criminals in big cities. It's not the guns, it's the people.
Yeah.
All right. That was a good last question to end on, I think. So thank you all for joining, and you both did some solid debunking on all these topics. And if you're watching this webinar, we had another comment roll through. So let me double check, because we didn't get a lot of questions in here, just a lot of comments, but there was another comment, so we're good. If you're watching this webinar, I'm sure you most likely have a firearm. If you ever do have to defend yourself, then what happens after you protect yourself? Not being legally protected after a self-defense incident, even if you're in the right, could cost lots of money. So before you wrap up this webinar, I'm going to discuss what FLP has to offer for you.
Firearms Legal Protection offers several different memberships to whoever is interested in signing up for legal protection. These plans are divided into individual plans and a family plan, which some benefits and pricing vary state by state. For the purposes of this webinar, we will look at our most common plans and benefits that are available in most states. The individual basic plan includes protection in your state of residence. It also includes uncapped payment of attorney fees for defense of criminal and civil cases. Firearms Legal Protection memberships also extend to all legal weapons, including non-lethal weapons. With the individual basic plan, you also have Defense of Extreme Risk Protection Orders, also known as red flag laws. All plans have access to the 24/7 emergency attorney answered hotline, so no matter a time an incident may occur, you can count on our hotline and an attorney will pick up for immediate attorney-client privileges. You also have access to the MyFLP mobile app and one of our recently added benefits, expungement of criminal record on non-conviction incidents. Members of all plans also receive access to digital content and special discounts. The next step up is the individual premium plan. This plan has nationwide coverage and also includes all the benefits just mentioned and payment of bail bond premium, payment of expert witness and investigator fees if either are needed in your case. There's also coordination of counseling support, payment of lost wages if you are out of work during trial, and a list of other benefits. We also have the family premium plan to choose from for those who want the same protection also applied to their family. For just a little bit more, you get all the benefits that were just mentioned applied to your spouse and all minor children. If you want more information over these benefits, then check out our Instagram or Facebook page for uploaded explained benefit videos. Remember, if you, friends, or family are not already protected by Firearms Legal Protection, please click the link below for a special discount we offer our webinar viewers. Now, let's get back to today's webinar.
All right. Since we did not have a lot of questions or any additional myths in the comments to address, that is going to wrap it up for tonight's webinar. But thank you guys for debunking some of these misconceptions. If you do have any additional questions, please email marketing@firearmslegal.com. And thank you again for joining this month's webinar. Before I finally wrap it up, do you guys have any last points you want to make for tonight's webinar?
One comment that a guy made way earlier when we were talking about the whole dry firing myth. And I mean, and I know this because I have so many of them and I didn't even think to mention it, but he's absolutely right. My favorite part about it, to take apart a Glock to clean it, you have to dry fire it. You have to pull the trigger to take apart your Glock to clean it. So, you know, just back on that one, I mean, I can't remember the viewer that said that, but you're absolutely right. And it just further shows the whole dry fire myth.
Yeah, and going back in there, somebody asked a question about are there situations where a lack of a firing pin block in a handgun could be seen as a detriment? I don't really think so. The idea behind having some sort of a device inside your handgun to prevent it from going off if it drops, that's great if you drop your gun and it keeps it from going off. But if we're talking about I'm pointing my gun at somebody that is threatening me, my thoughts are if you're going to shoot them, you need to be pulling the trigger. If you're in a position where they can say, well, the gun went off accidentally and you didn't intend to pull it, you shouldn't have been pointing it at the guy in the first place. And I kind of struggle to come up with a situation where that could really be a problem in real life.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. And I mean, people that carry guns with safeties and all that, that's fine. I have guns that actually have mechanical, physical safeties. The internal safeties are nice. If you did drop it, don't drop your gun. That's kind of an easy one, but stuff happens. But the more you have to do, the guns that I mainly carry, all I have to do is draw and shoot. I'm not having to think about anything else that I need to do of flipping off a physical safety or anything like that. And so, I mean, as long as you're being safe, you're keeping your finger off that trigger, that gun, I mean, firing pin or block or not, it shouldn't shoot unless you intentionally make it shoot by putting your finger on that trigger and pulling the trigger. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Remember everyone to click the links in the caption below to sign up for your firearms legal protection at a discounted rate, and to also let us know what you would like to see in any of our future webinars. We have them once a month. We appreciate hearing from you all. So make sure to keep providing content that we want you to continue joining in on. Also, if you enjoy content like this, then make sure to like our Facebook page and also hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel and that little bell to get notifications whenever we do go live webinars like this in the future. Thanks again, everyone, for joining tonight. Have a great rest of your night. Remember, protect yourself, we'll protect you.